You're right, thanks for the nudge. Here's the full story in English, written as a single, continuous Chuan Ku narrative. The lobby of Carter and Row didn't have a smell. That was the point. It was glass clean, lacquered, and temperature-controlled to the decimal, a place where executives did not so much arrive as glide, banking like planes into private airspace. Ava Thompson worked at the only piece of furniture that looked human in that room, a walnut reception desk that creaked if you leaned on it. When the morning crowd pressed through the turnstiles, she smiled, issued visitor badges, and kept the rings of the building's many phones from colliding. No one ever asked her name twice. On the day everything bent a few degrees toward the life she had always wanted, a 12-foot screen hung over the lobby like a page torn out of a storm. Lines of code fell in green threads, columns, checksums, headers that meant nothing to the architects and real estate partners, and meant everything to the engineers who suddenly stopped walking while pretending they hadn't. The man who had ordered the screen up and the code loaded strolled into view with a paper cup of espresso and the unhurried posture of someone who had never been late for anything. Julian Rowe was a story the company told itself to stay sharp. He had started in trading algorithms and finished in power. At Carter and Rowe, his name sat after the ampersand, not because he needed it to, but because the other founders did. He had gray eyes people described as steel when they were impressed, and storm when they were frightened, and he wore suits as if the line of the shoulder could keep your questions from sliding off. He lifted his chin toward the screen. "This file was designed by me," he said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The lobby inhaled. "Whoever cracks it joins the society." He let the phrase settle, then added, 48 hours. Any team, any tools, no clues, no second chances. A few people laughed the way you laugh at a magic trick when you've already figured it out. A few looked at their phones and fired messages to the people they trusted most. Ava sat still. She had been arranging courier pickups and rerouting a catering delivery that was about to mistake the venture portfolio meeting for a dental conference. When she looked up, only for a heartbeat, she noticed a symbol deep in the hex, 3 dots arranged like a sideways constellation. It didn't belong where it sat. She wrote it in the margin of her notebook. Ava did not look like someone who could eat a puzzle for dinner. She was slight, with thin-framed glasses that always slid down her nose in summer when the air conditioning wasn't sure who it worked for. The cardigan she wore most days had a thread she kept promising herself to clip. She did not talk much, and when she did, she chose verbs like she was buying them with her own money. But there was a second life under the cardigan and the careful phone voice. A scatter of sticky notes on her apartment wall. A stack of used textbooks with other people's highlights where she'd added her own. And a hard drive full of night classes. When her parents died on the Dan Ryan 3 years earlier, and a social worker slid a form across the kitchen table asking if she would take full custody of her 12-year-old sister, she had signed without looking up. The receptionist job came after that. The studying came anyway. At 5:57 p.m., when the lobby flood thinned to a trickle and you could finally hear the squeak of the revolving door, Ava used her administrative access to open a shared drive. There it was, a copy of the encrypted file with a perfunctory layer of protection, the digital equivalent of a "please don't touch" sign you put in front of something you secretly hope someone will touch. Ava touched it. She copied the file to a flash drive, shut down her station, and left by the side door. Southside looked different if you arrived tired. Ava's block smelled like fried onions and wet bus brakes when it rained, and like laundry detergent on Saturdays when everyone decided to start over. Their apartment was 2 rooms and a hallway, painted the kind of rental white that loves to show fingerprints. On one wall, Where other people put a TV, Ava had taped a crooked grid of paper. Substitution ciphers, frequency tables, logic puzzles she worked until the numbers went soft. Her sister, Mia, had claimed the bedroom with the window. Her laughter floated through a pair of too big headphones as she watched clips on her phone. Ava dropped her bag, rinsed a mug, and slid the flash drive into her laptop like it was something alive. Most encryption looks angry. This one looked sad. Not at first. The top layers blazed and flashed and warned the way you'd expect, but once you went down a level or two, once you started to feel the rhythm of it, there was a drag in the tempo, a looping, a reluctant repetition, like someone refusing to say the word they meant. She paused to listen to what wasn't there. She tried a common substitution on a hunch, then a partial hash reversal, then a filter that looked for patterns in the white space itself. Under the visible characters, in the pauses and line breaks, lived a different voice. She typed 3 words that came to her not as a guess, but as a memory. Mother, fire, silence. The screen winked. Another layer opened. Ava stepped back until the chair legs scraped. She had meant to eat dinner. She hadn't. She had meant to ask Mia about the math quiz. She would. But for now, there were sentences surfacing like photographs in a tray. She screamed my name. Smoke in the hallway. I ran. The door slammed. I was a coward. Ava pinched the bridge of her nose and took off her glasses. Somewhere in the city, a siren dopplered, and she remembered the moral of a podcast episode about machines and grief, that no matter how much metal you pile over a memory, the shape of it pokes through. She went to Mia's doorway and leaned there. The girl was asleep, face to the wall, phone dimming under her hand. You asked me once if people like us ever get real chances, Ava whispered. Maybe this is mine. She went back to the table. At 1:14 a.m., her code opened a hidden shell. The file was not only a challenge, it was a door. On the other side were messages labeled in strings that looked random until they didn't. A path of internal notes, a skeleton of communications written in the wary shorthand of people who knew better than to write anything down. One name returned like a tide, the Society. At the bottom, a prompt glowed, not demanding so much as inviting. Enter your name. Ava typed it. The cursor thought about her, then the shell went black and delivered a single line. Name registered. Find Julian Rowe within 24 hours to claim entry. She slept 3 hours, the kind of sleep that doesn't have a shape. In the morning, she packed Mia's lunch, wrote the bus money in a blue envelope, and kissed the crown of her sister's head the way her mother used to. You okay? Mia asked, the quick-eyed read only younger siblings have. I'm fine, Ava said. I'm thinking about work. You've got your code face, Mia teased. You get all quiet like you're listening through a wall. By 10, there were people in the lobby who had never been in the lobby before. Men and women who usually arrived by garage elevator. Engineers who hadn't come up for coffee in months. A real-time leaderboard on the big screen scrolled failure in the blunt red of a language that doesn't do nuance. In a glass conference room upstairs, department heads argued like chess players bumping clocks. He's not testing skill, said Marcus Green, head of InfoSec and retired Pentagon advisor, pacing. He's testing pride. Someone else said, he's testing surrender. No one said out loud that surrender had always been the price of admission. Julian moved among them with his cup, not checking progress so much as watching who watched him. He passed the reception desk, and Ava's good morning, sir, slid off the polished air. She plugged in her flash drive under the desk and watched her home-built decoder tick to 43%, then 51. She lowered her eyes when he reappeared, when he stopped by the server room door that never closed all the way, when through that small mouth of space she heard him say on a call, "If anyone breaks it, even by accident, I want to know why. I want to see if they understand me without my story." The only thing Ava wanted as much as to break his code was to understand the man who had written it. At 3:58 p.m. she climbed the executive stairs. She didn't change her clothes. She didn't rehearse. Room 19 had windows on 3 sides and a table that looked like a nautical instrument. Julian stood at the western pane, the city glittering under his hand. He didn't turn. "What brings you here?" he asked. "I read everything," Ava said, "and I understood it." He looked at her then, and the steel eyes did something softer. "You're the receptionist." "Ava Thompson, yes?" She nodded. "You decrypted my file?" "Yes," she said. "Alone, at home, at night." He crossed to a cabinet, produced a key, and set a metal box on the table between them with a sound like a gavel. "Do you know what this is?" "The original interface," she said. "A prototype." "It started as a memory vault," Julian said. "My mother died in a fire when I was 12. I was there. I ran. I built this company on the fantasy that control could replace powerlessness. It didn't. So I did what I know how to do. I encoded it. I turned it into a structure only the right person could open." He told her what the society was and what it wasn't. It was not a club, though people called it that to feel less excluded. It was a network of strategists, technologists, journalists, and organizers who leaned quietly on the levers other people pretended didn't exist. A map of intervention points where a nudge a week early could save a month of screaming. "We don't do victory laps," he said. "We don't do headlines. We do outcomes. You want me to join?" Ava said. "Yes," he answered, "if you accept the conditions." "Which are?" "More than intelligence," he said. "Clarity. Integrity, sacrifice." "Why me?" He stepped closer, and for the first time she saw the boy who had run. "Because you saw everything," he said, "and you didn't run." They didn't shake hands. He told her to return at 9 the next morning. He told her where to go and who not to speak to. She went home and sat on the floor of the kitchen and cried a kind, private, exhausted cry that tasted like a new country. The room at the top of the building had no name on a directory because it did not belong to the building. Its walls were screens. Its floor held a single table, bolted. 5 people sat when she entered, all of them the sort of ordinary-looking that only very dangerous people can manage. A woman with silver hair and a soldier's posture introduced herself as Eleanor Pike. A man with a tablet and warm eyes said his name was Sanjay Rao. Another, British by accent and topography, nodded without offering a hand. Graham Pennington. There were 2 more whose names she forgot while she remembered their questions. "Imagine you discover a corporation is privatizing a city's water supply," Eleanor said. "Exposing them saves thousands, but collapses an international deal with other positive effects. What do you do?" "Expose them," Ava said. "People before profit." "If that exposure costs you your job," Sanjay asked, "and your income." "I'll find other income," she said. "I won't sell my values." "What's your greatest fear?" Graham asked. "That my sister will learn she's not enough," Ava said, "and accept only what the world hands her." "What do you want from the society?" Eleanor asked. "I want to open doors to people who don't even know the hallway exists," Ava said. I want what happens in rooms like this to touch the people standing outside them." No one smiled. The silence was not disapproval. It was a recognition that something had been said the way it needed to be said. When the others left, Julian remained. "You passed," he said. "Not by telling us what we liked to hear, but what we needed to hear." He showed her the oval room with the map. Lights pulsed like heart monitors over neighborhoods and regions, red for crisis, yellow for listing, green for the steady state only some places are ever allowed to have. "These are intervention points," Julian said. "We leak the right documents. We fund the right groups through boring shell companies. We kill bad deals. We nudge better ones. We get in the way." Nicely, Ava touched a dot Detroit. Text swam up. Operation Hydrolo. Unconsented pharmaceutical trials on black residents. Infiltration underway. Exposure in 48 hours. Her stomach turned with a species of anger that felt clean. She touched another California. Public school algorithms that nudged black and indigenous students to lower tracks. Objective: terminate contract. Redirect funds to community-led education. "It's real," she said. Julian nodded. "We don't wait for headlines," he said. "We prevent them." Her own name glowed on a small blue tile. Ava Thompson. Status: active. Potential: exceptional. First assignment: pending. "This is too big," she said. "It is," he said. "So are you. You just never had a mirror to prove it." "If I say yes," she asked, "can I change how this works?" "You can lead your own cell," he said. "We don't need obedience. We need conviction." The assignment arrived the next morning like an alarm. Mission 01. Fabricated criminal case against community leaders in New Orleans designed to reroute federal housing funds. Objective: expose source of false intel before leak. Timeline: 72 hours. Ava didn't go home first. She sat in the oval room and opened files. The audio evidence bore the smoothness of a studio and the jitter of an amateur. She scrubbed the noise floor and found regularity that didn't belong to rooms where people talk. She checked timestamps and found the scars of editing. There is a way a man breathes between a word and his conscience. This one didn't. The silence was machine silence. She called in a favor not from anyone in power, but from people who keep the lights on. A maintenance supervisor at a municipal building checked access logs. A part-time editor at a gospel radio station compared waveforms and laughed. "Whoever faked this," he said, "has expensive toys and no church background." Real people do not sit that still. Ava drafted a memo that did not accuse but asked questions only the guilty would struggle to answer. She sent it not to the biggest newspaper, but to a reporter who still rode buses. She texted a pastor in the lower 9th Ward she had once met on a service trip as a teenager and asked if the church would host a meeting that evening. He said yes. By the end of 48 hours, the case had collapsed under the weight of its own clean edges. 2 political consultants were suspended, a procurement officer resigned, and the housing funds froze until community oversight could thaw them in the right direction. Her name was nowhere. The satisfaction lived in other people's mouths. The second mission went west. An Arizona reservation had a clinic with a refrigerator that worked and a supply chain that didn't. Vaccines arrived after they expired. Optimization had removed the only inefficiency that had ever helped. A driver who knew who needed extra, who could read storms by the backs of hawks. Ava borrowed 3 shipping containers, a solar array, and a mechanic who liked a challenge. She designed a scheduling model that listened to weather instead of spreadsheets, then let the mechanic call the shots. The supply arrived cold for the first time in months. The report she filed used the word resilience too few times for the grant writer who would eventually read it. The third mission smelled like a school hallway in September. An ed tech company had sold districts on an algorithm to recommend course tracks. The company's public documentation promised equity, its private cron job at 7 a.m. Scrubbed race-adjacent features out of the audit logs so no one could prove bias. Ava found the job, documented the deletion, restored the masked columns from a data lake backup, and built a visualization so simple a school board member could understand it without feeling stupid. The contract died quietly at the next meeting. The superintendent called it a routine vendor review. Ava didn't correct him. It is a routine vendor review when the routine gets better. Outwardly, nothing about her life changed. She still rode the bus with a paperback folded in one hand. She still bought cereal when she was too tired to cook. She still wore the cardigan that needed attention. But inside the scaffolding of her days moved. The bills were paid on time. She got a desk that did not wobble and a Saturday class for kids who loved math but didn't want to admit it. Ava's eyes carried more light at night. Rumors grew in the building like moss on the north side of a tree. Some said she had something on Julian. Some said she'd been hired as a plant years ago. The truth was less cinematic and more dangerous. She had paid attention to what others didn't. Julian, who once looked at people as if they might get between him and the thing he was walking toward, began to show up without the armor of his jacket when he met her, sleeves rolled, hands flat on the table. "What do you need?" he asked more than once. "The right people," she said every time. She began to gather them. None of them belonged in a brochure. A night shift nurse who knew which clinics lied on their forms because they were ashamed. A city bus driver who could map food desserts from his memory of grocery bags. A community college coder who wrote cleaner functions than people twice his salary, but never interviewed well. A master electrician who had quit a contractor, who shortened jobs by cutting corners. A mother who knew housing law better than the clerk who told her no. Ava gave them a name. Anchor, not to be romantic, but because that is what they were trying to be for one another. The weight that keeps a boat from leaving when the storm wants it gone. On a Sunday afternoon, she took Mia to a library that hadn't existed the year before. It smelled like new paper and hope. The director thanked a silent donor who believes in power through knowledge. Mia leaned into her. "It was you," she said. Ava smiled. She did not answer. Some sentences are true without needing to be said. The assignment that pressed on her chest in a particular way came with a bland subject line. A university with a beautiful lawn and a bad habit had standardized a scholarship process to reward cultural fit. The variable was a fraud built from social media behavior, zip codes, and parental debt. A statistical thicket that cut a path around the very students the scholarship claimed to serve. The consultant who wrote the first crude version had left a comment in his initial commit temporary, to be replaced later assigning a bonus to alumni network connections. Later never came. "You'll have friends at that table," Julian said when he slid the file across. "If you want to hand this one off." "We don't go after people," Ava said. "We pull out the nails that hold the harm in place." She and Anchor traced the life of the fit variable through the pipeline, followed it into a scheduled job that transformed it, sampled outputs before and after. They called a retired professor who had kept backups on a home NAS because she never trusted campus IT. They rebuilt the audit trail. On a Friday night, in a diner that never slept, Ava met a reporter who had written about admissions for 20 years and still believed in the phrase public good. She handed him a drive. Code, logs, emails that did not accuse but did not lie. By Monday, a story had raised questions that a board could not ignore. The process paused. A student coalition formed, then filed an open records request with the kind of courtesy that means business. The university promised a review. Ava did not wait for the outcome. She had already begun to work on the part that didn't need a vote. A community fund to cover the shortfall for the kids the scholarship would miss this year. Not every mission succeeded. 2 died of politics. 1 went sideways because a man who meant well needed his name attached to the win and slowed everything down. Ava learned the patience of people who work in privacy, to aim at the structure, not the applause, and to treat the work like a river, not a parade. In the building, something else shifted. Marcus Green came to the desk one afternoon and set a coffee where customers usually put packages. "I owe you an apology," he said, without looking like a man who had ever said those words. "I laughed last month." "So did I," Ava said. "Then I went back to work." He nodded. "If you need a forensics hand, call me." "I will," she said. And when a later case knotted itself around an offshore VPS and a sloppy attempt at plausible deniability, she did call him, and he showed up with the weird humilities of mastery. December dusted the city white. On the balcony outside their apartment, Mia asked, "Can an ordinary person change anything that's too big?" Ava put an arm around her. "There are 2 ways to climb a wall. The first is to climb. The second is to build a ladder and let everyone use it. The second takes longer. But when you reach the top, you won't be alone." Mia nodded, the air turning her breath into a small cloud. A proposal appeared on Ava's console the next morning. Establish local cell under Ava Thompson. Scope: public education, housing, community health. Status: approved. She closed her eyes and saw, not a mission, but a neighborhood, not a file, but a room. That evening, in the back of a church, Anchor met around a plastic table whose wobble they fixed with a folded bulletin. They drew a map on a whiteboard of the city they loved and the mistakes it refused to stop making. "We'll send 10 letters," Ava said. 5 to the offices that are supposed to care, 5 to the people who will never stop caring. In 24 hours, half of these holes will be harder to fall through. When everyone left, Julian texted, "Light on in 19. Up for a look?" She went. The oval room hummed. The map blipped like a planet breathing. "Those greens near the lakes, he said, nodding at the board. "That's you." Ava touched a light. A file opened. Community library, extended hours. Volunteer base doubled. She didn't grin. She just inhaled and let her lungs relearn what enough air felt like. "Power," she said, "at its best, feels like a hand at your back when you're learning to walk. You don't see it. It's warm. And when you've got your feet, it lets go." She still worked the desk in the morning. She still replaced toner when it ran out. Still showed lost guests where the elevators hid. Still wrote names on temporary badges. People still walked past her without seeing. That was fine. She didn't need to be seen to see. On a cold Friday, a man in a coat too expensive to be warm asked her for the restroom code and called her sweetheart as if the word were an umbrella he could hold over her head. Ava buzzed him through and then texted a single line to Anchor about the city council hearing on heat shutoffs scheduled for that afternoon. By evening, A bus driver had filled the public comment list with riders who understood what shut-off meant when Friday turned to Sunday. The hearing ran long. By Monday, the policy had been revised to require weekend moratoriums. The man in the coat did not notice that the building felt a degree kinder. Months later, when someone in another tower put another file on another screen and called it a test, Ava did not smile. She understood, better than she had at the beginning, that tests are only useful if they measure the thing that matters. She still believed in puzzles. She believed more in people. She sat with Mia at the kitchen table and helped with algebra, not because the girl couldn't do it, but because doing it together made the room feel like the room their mother had wanted them to have. She kept the sticky notes on the wall. She added one more, in a smaller hand than the rest. Read the spaces between. If the story needs a moral for anyone who likes a bow on the end of things, let it be this. Systems have fingerprints. Whoever built them left pieces of themselves behind their fears, their habits, their griefs. If you learn to read those fingerprints, you can open doors you were never meant to see, and better, hold them for others. Ava Thompson was a receptionist to people who only watch what's lit. To anyone making a list of the people who saved a city a little at a time, she was the person who listened to the quiet parts and answered them with work. And in a world that keeps score in headlines, that is how so many important games are actually won.